Okay, so today is January 6th. It is the first anniversary of the only important moment in modern American history, according to the left. Here is the thing. The reason that the left is paying attention to January 6th is pure politics. This is pure political theater because politics is always politics, and it is not possible to be too cynical about politics. It really is not. The big news of the day is not January 6th. The big news of the day is that the Federal Reserve officials at their meeting last month, according to the Wall Street Journal, are now eyeing a faster timetable for raising interest rates this year, potentially as soon as March. And Democrats are panicking because when the Fed raises the interest rates, yes, inflation gets curbed, but also unemployment is likely to go up. Because typically, when you raise the interest rates, you make it harder for people to borrow. When you make it harder for people to borrow, they cannot then spend that money on hiring people. And so employment tends to go down. And so Democrats are freaking the hell out. And they should be freaking out. This is all bad policy brought about by Joe Biden's interventionist take on economics. And the Federal Reserve raising its rates is going to have some pretty dire effects for the Democrats come 2022 in the midterm elections. According to the Wall Street Journal, minutes of their December 14th to 15th meeting released Wednesday showed officials believe that rising inflation and a very tight labor market could call for lifting short-term rates sooner or at a faster pace than participants had earlier anticipated. Some officials also thought the Fed should start shrinking its $8.76 trillion portfolio of bonds and other assets relatively soon after beginning to raise the rates. Investors would see the move as another way for the Fed to tighten financial conditions to cool the economy. Okay, the predictable effect of this revelation is that stocks immediately dumped. They turned sharply lower after the minutes were released on Wednesday afternoon. The Dow Jones fell 1.1%. The NASDAQ lost 3.3%. Meanwhile, government bond yields rose on Wednesday. Trading in interest rate futures implied a roughly 2/3 probability that the Fed would raise rates in March. Okay, so what does this mean? It means that Democrats desperately have to redirect to January 6th. So both Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States, and Joe Biden spoke at the Capitol Rotunda this morning. They did so because, of course, they have to make hay while the sun shines, January 6th being the most important thing in history. Joe Biden is not great at this. Kamala Harris is just absolutely abysmal at this. So Joe Biden was able to sort of cover some of his tracks. Kamala Harris just kind of puts it all right out there.
Here in this very building, a decision will be made about whether we uphold the right to vote and ensure free and fair elections. Let's be clear. We must pass the voting rights bills that are now before the Senate. And the American people must also do something more. We cannot sit on the sidelines. We must unite in defense of our democracy.
Here was Vice President Kamala Harris claiming that January 6th was just like, wait for it, Pearl Harbor and 9/11.
Certain dates echo throughout history, including dates that instantly remind all who have lived through them where they were and what they were doing when our democracy came under assault. Dates that occupy not only a place on our calendars, but a place in our collective memory. December 7th, 1941, September 11th, 2001, and January 6th, 2021.
Here's Joe Biden talking about the threat to democracy from which he must save us all.
I did not seek this fight brought to this Capitol 1 year ago today, but I will not shrink from it either. I will stand in this breach. I will defend this nation, and I will allow no one to place a dagger at the throat of democracy. We will make sure the will of the people is heard, that the ballot prevails, not violence, that authority in this nation will always be peacefully transferred.
I mean, this is Joe Biden's entire shtick. His entire shtick is democracy was under grave, unbelievable, unprecedented threat on January 6th, but he will stand in the breach. All you have to do is give him complete, ultimate power.
You can't love your country only when you win. You can't obey the law only when it's convenient. You can't be patriotic when you embrace and enable lies. Those who stormed this Capitol, and those who instigated and incited, and those who called on them to do so, held a dagger at the throat of America, at American democracy.
It's so tiresome. It's so tiresome because we know the game that he's playing, right? I mean, the game that he is playing right here is let me pass the legislation I want. Otherwise, you are the dagger at the throat of democracy. When he compares what happened on January 6th to the Edmund Pettus Bridge, like black people being beaten up for being black as part of a broader Jim Crow effort to subvert the rights of black people, when he compares it to December 7th, what he's really saying is that anybody who disagrees with his agenda is the enemy, because when he says he wants a renaissance of democracy, he does not mean respect for elections purely and simply. What he really means is pass my Voting Rights Act. He means let me add 87 justices to the Supreme Court and kill the filibuster and federalize election procedure. That's what he means. It's a political game, and pretending that it's not, pretending that this is all just good-hearted, let's get together and be more civil about our election, that's not what he's doing, and anyone with half a brain knows that's not what he's doing. Okay, the worse things get for the Democrats, the more they're going to redirect to January 6th. Now, why? This is the real question that should be asked. Why? So January 6th was a bad moment in American history. It was. And it was a moment in American history. What I mean by that is that President Trump spent from November 4th to January 6th telling people that he had duly won the election and that for fraudulent reasons, Joe Biden was being selected as president. And then he had his legal advisors telling people falsely that under the Electoral Count Act, the Vice President of the United States had the capacity to simply throw away state-certified votes. That is not true. Donald Trump had every legal avenue available to him to challenge election results. He did it sometimes. He didn't allege half of the stuff that he has alleged publicly. And so by the time that it came time to certify the election, which happened in early December, by the time that happened, the Trump team had basically made no case as to why states should throw out their own election results. That is not to deny that there is election fraud in a country with 155 million votes. There will be some election fraud. This is not to deny that there wasn't screwing around with the elections given the procedures of 2020. Thanks to the pandemic and thanks to Democratic opportunism, there are a bunch of absentee ballots that were being sent out to people who did not ask for them, or you had increased drop in mailboxes, or you had increase in terms of the number of people who were voting early, right? All of this is true. And it is also true that the election was, in fact, rigged from the perspective of the media, silencing information, preventing true information from getting to the public, and manipulating information that you did see, right? All of that can be true. And also, Donald Trump did not have a legal case for overturning the election. And that is just the simple fact of the matter. If he had had a legal case for overturning the election, he would have won some cases legally. He did not win. And he won one case legally, and that was quickly overturned out of something like 80 across the country. Okay, and the ballot recounts that have been done in places like Georgia and in Arizona, including the audit that was done in Arizona, the much ballyhooed Maricopa County audit, found that there was not mass electoral fraud on the scale necessary to declare that Donald Trump had won the election in Arizona, for example. Okay, so Donald Trump from November 4th to January 6th was maintaining that he was the rightfully elected president of the United States, or that the election was totally fraudulent, or that the Senate Majority Leader and the Vice President of the United States had the legal capacity to simply throw out duly certified state votes. That was not true. Okay, but Donald Trump did not tell people to storm the Capitol building. He did not. He said that people should peacefully protest at the Capitol building. So a bunch of people went over there. There was a huge rally. Like tens of thousands of people. The vast majority of those people went home. The vast majority of those people did not engage in the violence at the Capitol building. And then several hundred people did engage in violence at the Capitol building. Something like 100 police officers were injured. And some of those people broke into the Capitol building. And some of the people in the Capitol building were running around yelling for Mike Pence or assaulting police officers. And some of those people were just kind of wandering around inside. Okay, that is what happened on January 6th. And then within 3 hours, the entire place was clear. All of the Congress people were back in their seats. And Mitch McConnell and Mike Pence were certifying the election. That's what actually happened on January 6th. Okay, we were all there. We all remember it. It was bad. It was not good. The President of the United States waited too long to tell people to go home. But all of that said, was this a full-blown coup? No, because a coup requires some sort of institutional support that would legitimate a failure of an effective transition of power. And people say there was no peaceful transition of power. That is a lie. There was a peaceful transition of power. The presence of a riot does not mean that there was no peaceful transition of power. If that were the case, there was no peaceful transition of power back in 2017, when Donald Trump, at his inauguration, there were massive riots outside Trump's inauguration involving the arrest of over 200 people. Was that a peaceful transition of power? It was, because Joe Biden left and Donald Trump took office. Well, on January 20th of 2021, Donald Trump left and Joe Biden took office. That is called a peaceful transition of power. Was this a moment of crisis for our democracy? No, it wasn't. Within 3 hours of idiots invading the Capitol building, the election was being certified. And so then why is this a moment of national disgrace, a moment of national shame? And the answer is because for the left, it must be. It must be because the left's goal within 24 hours of this event, forget 24 hours, within 24 minutes of this event, it became wildly apparent that for the Democrats and for the media, this was gold. And it was gold because they got to try and lump in everyone who voted with Trump to people who protested the election, and then lump in all those people with the Capitol rioters. So the idea was that if you voted for Trump, or if you voted against Biden, or if you would ever consider voting for Trump, or if you would ever consider voting for any other Republican, you were complicit in the actions of January 6th. This became perfectly clear when Parler was knocked offline by Amazon Web Services. Amazon Web Services is a neutral service provider. The suggestion was that Parler had been used to organize the January 6th riots, and therefore, Parler needed to be dumped offline. Well, Facebook was used much more than Parler for that. They weren't dumped offline. Twitter was used. Twitter was not dumped offline. It became very clear very quickly that major institutions in the United States were going to use January 6th as the excuse and the predicate for cracking down on political opposition, and that's what continues today. The left's argument is that January 6th is not just something that happened. It's not just a bad thing perpetrated by people who acted criminally and are going to jail. It was not even about Donald Trump saying things that were not true. It was not about any of that. It was about a full-fledged attempt by the right wing in the United States to subvert democracy, and that can only be stopped, according to the left, by allowing them to subvert democracy. Tear away at the fundamental institutions of republicanism in this country. Get rid of the Senate filibuster, for example, so they can pass a Voting Rights Act, which is not really a Voting Rights Act. It's a Federalization of Elections Act, complete with insanely loose election restrictions. Right? This is their argument. Their argument is you must give them total power to prevent the Republicans from taking total power, because after all, those evil, evil Republicans are seeking to take total power. Now, what are they basing that on? They're basing that on the fact that there are laws that have been passed in states like Georgia that shore up certain election procedures and actually loosen certain election procedures. Everyone who looks at the Georgia law, just facially, understands this is not a device for stealing elections in Georgia. Anyone who suggests to you that the Georgia election law is about Republicans stealing election is out of their mind or lying to you. The great election threat here does not exist. Okay, Republicans are not stealing elections across the country. The left is suggesting, for example, that the John Lewis Voting Rights Act be used in order to crack down on particularly red states when it comes to redistricting. There's only one problem. According to Cook Political, in Republican states in which they've engaged in redistricting this year, there really is no major shift toward Republican seats. There's actually more of a shift in Democratic states with Democratic redistricting than there is in Republican states with Republican redistricting. In other words, this is not a major problem. But Democrats have decided it's a major problem because they wish to use this as the excuse to seize more power. That's what this is about. This is not a sincere effort. Nobody believes this is sincerely about January 6th. If it were, which part of it would be sincere from the left? The part where they're very upset about people protesting elections? Who's going to make that case? Governor Stacey Abrams of Georgia, who lost an election by 50,000 votes and was declared in 2020 a governor of Georgia by the Democratic Party at their national convention? Who exactly on the Democratic side of the aisle is really upset about people who protest elections? The same people who spent 4 years declaring that Donald Trump was only president because of Russian collusion and Facebook memes? Or maybe we're supposed to believe that the Democratic left is deeply, deeply upset and angry over the treatment of police officers on January 6th. I mean, hell, the New York Times has an entire piece today titled, "Capitol Police Bear Scars of Riots." Okay, now I just have a question. About 100 police officers, 120 police officers were injured on January 6th over the course of the Black Lives Matter riots, which were predicated on a huge lie. A much bigger lie, by the way, in consequence for literally millions of Americans than the lie that President Trump openly won the 2020 election, for example. The lie that America's police are systemically racist, targeting black men and shooting them down in the streets. That's what Black Lives Matter was predicated upon. It was a full-blown lie promoted by every major Democrat to the point where you had the current vice president of the United States bailing rioters out of jail in Minnesota. In those riots, over 2,000 police officers were injured. Not one word from Democrats on this. So are we supposed to believe that the reason that this is a truly historic event is because of mistreatment of police? Is that what we're meant to believe from the media and the Democrats? Which part of January 6th is the part that they are really, they're standing on solid ground in terms of their own approach toward, for example, elections or treatment of police or treatment of political violence, which they winked and nodded at, in some cases openly promoted in the middle of 2020. That's why, as always, this is a political game. And pretending that it is anything but a political game is being pretty damned dishonest. The battle for the culture is heating up. We here at the Daily Wire are making some big moves. So be sure to like, subscribe, ring that bell, because you're not going to want to miss a single moment.